and the folks have a good attitude of trying to help people rather than trying to keep people from getting benefits. So that's good news, but we don't know it's always going to be that way, and that's the other reason we want a good power of attorney, because if they get sticklers for it, we want a power of attorney that allows us to do the things we want to do. One other thing I wanted to say at some point there is that, and this illustrates the difference that I was intimating between VA and Medicaid. If you're not allowed to have more than $2,000 in assets, well then it doesn't take long to realize, hey, why don't I just give it all to the kids? Now I'm destitute and I qualify. Well, I like to say that the government was born at night, but it wasn't last night. They figured that out. And there is a look-back period of now 5 years. For planning purposes, it's 5 years. We get very complicated. For an application we're filing today, it's really only 3 years. But for planning purposes, it's 5 years. And if they look back during that look-back period, if they see uncompensated transfers of where you gifted money away, then that creates a potential penalty. And for example, pre-07, the penalty started running on the date of the gift. So that if you gave $50,000 a year ago to a grandchild for college education, pre-07, that wouldn't be a problem because the penalty is 1 month for every 5,000. So 50,000 would be a 10-month penalty, and it would have already run because it was more than a year ago. So it's not a problem. But if that gift was after 11/1/07, now we got a problem because the penalty doesn't start running until you're otherwise qualified for Medicaid. So we have to get in there and look at how we're going to fix that problem. And there are ways to fix it. One of which, in that example I gave, is we could advocate to Medicaid that that transfer was not made for purposes of qualifying for Medicaid. I wasn't sick at the time I did it, and it's been my custom to pay for the college education of my grandkids. So we try to argue that, but the point is we got to be prepared to fix problems. Okay, I've talked about a number of exemptions and stuff, but if you still have excess countable assets, there are other strategies that we can apply to those assets. One of which is we can try to convert countable assets into income or unavailable assets. For example, and I'm still talking about a single person. I don't know how long I'm getting a little windy here. I'm still talking about a single patient. We've got a couple slides ahead that's labeled The Joys of Marriage. And the point of that slide is there's a lot of things we can do when we have a married situation. But right now we're talking about a single patient. And so if we have excess countable assets, we can try to invest them in non-countable assets. The first thing right off the top is if there was a mortgage on the homestead, we just pay off the mortgage. Now we've taken countable assets and converted them into exempt assets. Or if the house needs some repairs or something, we can do that. We can buy a car. We talk about prepaid funeral, the account. But generally, we can convert something that would otherwise be called an asset into an income stream. For example, if we wanted to, we could go out and buy rental property. And most of my clients don't really want to do that. But arguably, if you felt comfortable in taking care of the rental property, you could take countable assets, shelter them into rental property, and possibly be buying at assets at the bottom of the market. And there's also a company over in the West Coast. There's several companies in Florida where we can send them some money and they'll send us a deed to an undivided 0.457% interest in a strip center. And we can do that. You know, you hear about Medicaid compliant annuities and things like that. We would take money and invest it into a short-term annuity. actually in a single patient, that's not really going to do us a lot of good, because we're taking asset, converting it into income, and remember what happens to the patient's income? It goes to the nursing home. Now that, however, is going to be a good technique when we get into a married patient. One thing on there that I haven't talked about yet is a care contract. I mentioned that earlier, a monthly payment care contract to create unreimbursed medical expenses to help us qualify for the VA benefit. But actually on the Medicaid side, if we have some excess assets, we can enter into a lump sum personal care contract, possibly with one of the children, whereby the senior pays the child a lump sum of money in exchange for the child's signing a contract promising to take care of mom or dad for the rest of their life. And we figure out the assets, the services that are going to be covered: bookkeeping services, personal services, care management services. We can't duplicate things that are provided by government benefits, but even when somebody's in a nursing home, their care is better if it's managed. And we figure out how many hours per week we're going to do each one of those kinds of services, times a reasonable hourly rate, times the Social Security life expectancy of the patient. And many times we can get $100,000 or more into a personal care contract, and thereby convert countable assets into non-countable assets and get the person qualified for Medicaid. I oftentimes say in almost every area of the law there's advantages and disadvantages of everything that we talk about. Care contract, one of the disadvantages is it's taxable income to the person to whom the money is paid. And sometimes, we have older caregiver children or disabled caregiver children that don't want the income. So you have to carefully look at all angles of these techniques. And beware misinformation. This is all complicated, and I've mentioned to you a couple times, be careful what you hear from other people. It may not be accurate as to time or as to geographical location, etc. The joy of marriage is that I get to work with the world's loveliest office administrator. But in a long-term care planning scenario, there's all kinds of things that we can do when we have a marriage situation. And, I